What's up, guys? Nice 2-0 night last night. Chicago Blackhawks, easy win, no sweat as a big underdog, which is nice to see. There was some sweat happening in the other game, the late game, Pittsburgh at LA. That was a game where LA was outplaying them statistically, I would say for sure. They had a huge shot discrepancy, at least like well into the second period. But on the scoreboard, Pittsburgh was leading by one goal for, I would say, like the majority of the game. They took a one-goal lead early and then gave it up on a shorthanded goal, which is certainly not what you want to see. Obviously, when you're up 1-0 and you have the man advantage, the last thing you want to do is somehow give up a goal on that in that situation to tie the game. That's what happened. But Pittsburgh was able to regain the one-goal lead later in the game in the third period. Then they gave that up. Wound up going into overtime, and they still won in overtime. But at least if you have an underdog, even if they did get statistically outplayed, so there was that aspect of it, but if you do have a money line underdog and it's close all the way like that, and they send it into overtime, at least from that aspect of it, you know that you do have some value on that ticket. So I don't think it was a bad play. Tonight, I'm going to have three plays or three spots that I've found that I like, all in the NBA. I just don't like what I'm seeing in many of these other sports. North Texas is playing SMU in college football tonight with these two kind of isolated games. I don't think this is much of a game that anybody's going to want to pay attention to. SMU's gone up to a 17-point favorite, and it looks like 63% of the tickets, but 58% of the cash on the North Texas side. So somehow it looks like North Texas is a public underdog getting all those points. I don't know. I don't know if their name is carrying some weight or what's going on there. SMU clearly the better team, and SMU does kind of still need to at least win games outright to stay in the running for that conference there. Which conference is that now? I don't even know. CUSA or American? I'm not even sure what it is. Whatever the hell conference that is. SMU, I think, still has a shot to get into the conference championship or whatever. So they do still have that to play for, I believe, because they're in the mix there. But they're playing a pretty bad North Texas team, a team that's significantly worse than they are. So it's possible there might be an aspect of it where they might overlook them a little bit because of that. And SMU does have Memphis next, which is much more of a conference battle there, with Memphis a little bit behind them, and it's a little bit of a rivalry game there, I think. So there's that aspect of that. I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion on that. Don't think I have a strong opinion on the Mountain West game that's tonight either, with Wyoming at UNLV. Maybe a very slight lean to UNLV, but not strong at all. UNLV's gone up to a 5-point favor, and it does look like it's continuing to go up. So I would still try to get it at least when it's in that no man's land if you're going to lay points on that. 88% of the cash, but 82% of the tickets. So it looks like they're getting money, but they are kind of public as well because they're the team with the better record, although not by much. And I think in college football, people don't expect much out of a UNLV team that's usually not very good, but they are pretty good this year. Wyoming, I believe, is coming off their sixth win over Colorado State, so they just gained bowl eligibility. So there might be that like little bit of a letdown aspect to that there, where they've kind of accomplished at least what they wanted to do. Even though I don't know if they're in the rankings, or they were like a pretty high, like they were up high in the Midwest. They were among the top teams in the conference for a while there. Record-wise, but kind of fell off a little bit because I don't think they are quite as good as some of those other teams. So I don't know if there's like that disappointment aspect over there, but I think primarily their main goal was probably get the bowl eligibility, which they did just do. UNLV does have a pretty good rushing attack, and I think that's bad matchup-wise for Wyoming because their defense is not good at stopping the run. I don't have many more feelings on that. I think it would be, if anything, just maybe a very small lean to UNLV there. Moving to hockey, there are 6 games, but I really don't see a whole lot going on here. I think close to a play, but couldn't quite get there with it, would have been on the Washington Capitals against the New Jersey Devils. The Devils have gone down from minus 190 on the money line to minus 175 with 82% of the tickets, but only 55% of the cash. So that does tell me the market, there are some more substantial bettors that I guess agree with me here that the play would be to go against New Jersey. New Jersey's coming back from a road trip, so that's why I start by going, like, looking to want to go against them. 4-game road trip that took them kind of out into the Midwest and Mountain Time. They lost to the Avalanche to finish that road trip 2-2, and that's a big game. The Avalanche, one of the bigger name teams in hockey, one of the better teams in hockey, lost that game, but lost it kind of badly. So I don't know if that might take a little bit away from it, but they do have 2 days off, but this is a 1-game homestand, and they immediately go back out and play Winnipeg, who's a team with a winning record, and then Pittsburgh, who's looking pretty good right now, and one of the better teams in New Jersey's own conference, because I believe they're both in the Eastern Conference, and then they have the Rangers, and then Detroit after that. So a whole slew of teams with winning records, with this Washington game just kind of sandwiched in there as a return home in a single game at home. So the spot-wise, it looks bad for New Jersey for the most part. So I would only look to take Washington as the underdog there. Don't know if I can quite get there with it, though, even though I think it's somewhat of a strong lean for all those reasons I just said. New Jersey has that extra day off, but I don't know if that really matters. So I think the return home is still going to be a distracted spot. You're coming off of playing the good Avalanche team in elevation. So they might overlook the Washington team, except for the fact that one of New Jersey's only losses on the season was to Washington in their own house. That's like the one thing that keeps me off of it a little bit, is that there might be that like quick in-season revenge aspect to this, where Washington did beat them 6-4 in New Jersey. So there is that maybe a little added motivation for New Jersey to keep them a little bit focused. And Washington is coming off a close overtime loss, I believe, to the Eastern Conference Finals representative last year, the Florida Panthers, who were in the Stanley Cup Finals last year, won the Eastern Conference. Washington's coming off an OT game against them 2 days ago, but they are starting a 2-game road trip here, so that might help them refocus a little bit. They're coming off a pretty tough loss, a pretty big game as well, but I think they will still be focused on a New Jersey team, who's one of the better teams in the conference. Those are my feelings on that. I think the strongest lean in hockey is to go against the New Jersey Devils there, but I don't know if it's quite strong enough that I can play it, because there are those few situational aspects that kind of go against it there. NBA, we're going to go with a threesome here. 3 plays. I can't help myself. I'm feeling hot after the 2-0 night, and I kind of like all 3 spots. One thing I will point out quickly, one of the other things I saw here, I didn't see many angles in the other games, but I think the Brooklyn Nets are in kind of a quick revenge spot against the Celtics. And the Celtics are coming off a pretty big game against the Sixers, which they lost, which I'll talk about in a second, so you know where I'm going there. The Sixers were able to exact pretty big revenge to avenge getting knocked out of the playoffs last year by the Celtics. That's a big game, a big Eastern Conference matchup anyway. The Celtics are having to come off of that, and prior to that, I think 2 games before that, they had won, I believe, at Brooklyn as like a 10-point favorite or something. Now they're at home and they're only an 11-point favorite, so there's no like overreaction to that, maybe because the Celtics have lost the 2 games in between those 2 Nets games, so I think there isn't really like a zigzag component to that anymore as far as like the line is concerned. I don't think the line is overreacting to anything the Celtics have done recently, and if it is, it might be overreacting to them not playing well, but I think the Celtics are not in a good spot, coming off that big game against the Sixers. And the Nets, like I said, just lost in their own building to the Celtics. Nets are getting 85% of the cash, but 67% of the tickets are on the Celtics, who look like they've ticked up from 10.5 to 11 as a favorite. And they were somewhere in the vicinity of 10 on the road against the Nets. So people might think maybe there's a little bit of value on the Celtics. I would not want to touch the Celtics in that spot. Quick road revenge reversal angle for the Nets there. And the Celtics coming off a pretty big game there against the Sixers. So I would only look to take the points with the Nets. But moving to the actual 3 plays, number 1, which I just alluded to, is going to be the Detroit Pistons, my favorite team to play last year. It was like, I played them as an underdog a bunch of times, and it was like whenever I did, they won outright. And those were like their only outright wins of the season almost. I think they only won 10 or 11 games last year, and it seemed like 8 of those were on games that I bet, and it was like, I think they only didn't cover in like maybe 1 or 2 games where I played them. So the Pistons were great for me last year. Let's see if that continues. Hopefully it does. I don't know. 76ers have gone up from a 7-point favorite up to, I believe I took this at 8.5, or it was at least 8. On the road there, they're still going up, which is odd because it looks like they have 62% of the tickets, but 58% of the cash on the home underdog in the Detroit Pistons. So the market discrepancy certainly looks like it's indicating on the Pistons, which I agree with. Don't know what has moved the line up a little bit on the 76ers. But as I just alluded to, 76ers are in a really big letdown spot. They just beat the Celtics. Huge, not only a huge game in general, because it's that huge revenge game where they were able to exact revenge for the Celtics, knocking them out last year. Huge win for the 76ers, but it's potentially like an Eastern Conference Finals preview game or something like that, because there are two of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. Huge game for the Sixers, and it actually put the Sixers ahead of the Celtics record-wise, at least temporarily. So big-time win there. I think they can only be in a letdown spot. Now they have to go to Detroit just for this weird one single road game. So I don't know how focused you can be on a Detroit team that's only won 2 games on the season. They have Indiana up next to, I think, does have a winning record at least. So I don't know. And then they have Boston again after 2 games against Indiana. They could have overlooked Detroit, though, and I think at the very least it's a massive, massive letdown spot coming off the huge win over Boston. The Pistons did just play the Bucks on the same day, though, and played them pretty tight. So that's maybe the one hesitation I would have there is that, but I think you're going to be focused when you have to play a Philadelphia team who's one of the top teams in the conference. The Pistons, even though they played pretty tough and lost at Milwaukee, they can only really the only thing they're going to have to do here is focus on this Philly game. They don't really have anything upcoming. This is another big opponent for them, even though they played a few in a row, which makes you a little bit hesitant, but they're getting a ton of points at home. I think they're going to show up focused, and I think Philadelphia might be a little bit unfocused in the situation there. And so I don't take too much away from Detroit, having played that tough game against the Bucks. I like Detroit. Pistons plus 8.5 or plus 8 or whatever it was. That's play number 1. Number 2 is going to be on the next game on the card here. Charlotte Hornets. Wizards are -2 at home. It looks like they have 73% of the cash somehow, but only 70% of the tickets. I'm not sure I buy that. I think the Wizards are certainly going to be the public team here, even though both of these teams have similar, bad losing records. This is a quick zigzag spot for a few different reasons. Washington just played in Charlotte and absolutely annihilated them, beat them 132-116. Huge blowout win. So people are going to look at that and think, well, Washington could just do it again. Of course, they beat them on the road by a ton, so why wouldn't they easily beat them at home? This looks so easy. You're just taking them to win the game, essentially. They're only favored by 2. The Hornets were favored by 2.5 at home in that game in Charlotte. So I think this line is about where it should be based on that, saying that the Hornets are actually the slightly better team in this matchup. But again, people are going to look at that last game and think it's so easy. You're just taking Washington to just win this game, basically. When it looks too easy, always say, I think it is. Of course, I think it is. This being the zigzag and quick road revenge for Charlotte here. But when you have a situation like that, Charlotte's also the team that did everything wrong in the previous game. They're the team that has all the adjustments to make. When you're Washington, you have nothing to adjust. You just played really well. You played a perfect game and destroyed Charlotte. So what else can you do? There's nothing you can adjust there. So it's that zigzag component of it. And Washington's returning from a road trip. That was the last game of a 4-game road trip where they finally got a win, at least on the road trip, even though they did play 3 straight games against teams that were in the playoffs. Washington has had a more difficult schedule than Charlotte. I will give you that. They played Atlanta, Miami, Philly all on the road there. And that was after losing at home to Boston, after losing to the Memphis Grizzlies the game before that. So they played all playoff teams from last year, basically leading into that Charlotte game, and finally stepped down in class and won that game. So you might think, well, that might be a momentum starter, but I don't think so, because now you're returning home with only 1 day off. For a single game homestand, so you have all those distractions of coming home. Whatever you're doing at home, you got to get that done, because you're going back out on the road right after that, and they're going to play Brooklyn, who at least in name is a much bigger team than Charlotte is, and then Toronto, and then coming back home to play Dallas, and then New York, Milwaukee. So bigger name teams all coming up here. So this is maybe the down spot in the Wizards' schedule here. Whereas for Charlotte, this is their first game of a road trip. So Washington is returning from a road trip and finished that road trip by winning in Charlotte's house in blowout fashion. Charlotte's starting a 2-game road trip here, having to face the team that just beat them in their own house, and they were returning from a road trip for a 1-game homestand in that game. So that wasn't a very good spot for Charlotte, and they were coming off a game where they played tough in Dallas. So Charlotte was in the road trip return spot in that one, the bad spot. Flip it around, and now it's Washington that's in the bad spot. So there's a lot of components here that I like. There's the zigzag on top of it being that road trip return angle where the other team was in the road trip return angle in the previous game when they lost. So now Charlotte is starting the road trip here in a much more positive spot. So I like it quite a bit. It looks way too easy to take Washington after seeing that previous result. Charlotte Hornets +2. We'll do that one. And then the final one that I see, I think this is a sandwich spot. Pretty big time sandwich spot for the Houston Rockets here, even though they're up to 2.5. From 2 to 2.5 at home is a favorite. Don't really see any numbers yet on this game as far as the money and ticket percentages. Houston Rockets are on a big win streak, but it was against the Charlotte Hornets. All these games are at home. Charlotte Hornets, then Sacramento twice, where it looks like Sacramento maybe just doesn't know what they're doing. Maybe it's just a bad matchup for Sacramento. Because I don't know how Sacramento did that poorly in the zigzag situation in the second game where the line had moved quite a bit there. They still didn't show up. And then after that, Houston annihilated the LA Lakers, who were one of the teams in the Western Conference Finals last year. So Houston, immediately you look and you say they're in a letdown spot. They just crushed the LeBron-led Lakers. They crushed the Lakers at home. Huge win. They've won all the games but one on the homestand here up to this point in this long homestand. So immediately you say they're in a letdown spot. But what else is going on here? What else do they have? Oh, they have the Denver Nuggets up next, the other team that was in the NBA Finals last year, or the other team that was in the conference finals and won and got into the conference finals last year. And they have Clippers, Lakers, Golden State, Memphis, Denver, Dallas, Denver, Lakers again, all after this. So it's all bigger teams, all teams that were in the playoffs last year. And I think New Orleans might have been in one of those play-in playoff games last year. I don't even remember. But this is definitely the down spot in the schedule there for the Houston Rockets. I like it. I like the Pelicans +2.5 there, or whatever the line is. Pelicans are coming off a bad game. They've played 2 games on the road so far. They played at the Nuggets, or I think they were in that game for quite a bit, but wound up looking pretty bad in the final score, losing by almost 20. Had to go out of elevation and then play at Minnesota, another good team, and lost that game by a lot, 21. So they got to be in kind of a bounce back spot here. They are facing a game they know has got to be a more winnable game than those other two. I think they're going to want to turn it around. I think they're still without McCollum, who they were without for those previous 2 road games. So one of their stars is up, but now I think the line is kind of adjusted to reflect that. With a couple games under your belt without him, now you're kind of adjusted to that. I like the Pelicans. So those 3 plays, again, are going to be the Detroit Pistons +8 or 8.5, whatever it is, at home. Charlotte Hornets on the road +2, and New Orleans Pelicans +2.5 on the road. Those are the 3 plays. The NBA threesome, I like it. And there is a nice college basketball slate here. I'll just point out one thing, because there isn't really much that I saw when I just briefly looked at this. Still a lot of easy games for some of the bigger teams here, but the big game on the slate, I think, even though, Duke is playing Arizona, that's a pretty big game. Duke's a 5.5-point favorite, and they've gone up a little bit. That's a game between 2 ranked teams, but I do think Duke is the better team there, so I don't know if there's much to look at there. The one game where I think there might be some value and there might be a lean that I have here is Texas A&M against Ohio State, which I think is at Ohio State. I'm not sure. You're never sure where these games are actually at because of all these preseason tournaments or whatever, but A&M has had the upper hand out of these 2 teams. Recently, they've been the better of the 2 teams. Ohio State's been a disappointment, but it seems like Ohio State's always ranked and they have big expectations to start the season. This year, that's not the case. They start the season unranked, so I think maybe that pressure's off a little bit, and they don't have as high of expectations here that they usually do. So they're unranked, and they're hosting a ranked Texas A&M team, and Texas A&M Ohio State's the favorite, and they've gone up from -1 to -1.5. So that's telling you Texas A&M's the better team, but not by that much. So the public might look at this and think, like, what's going on here? There's got to be value taking the ranked team as an underdog against an unranked team, right? Like we've seen Texas A&M make nice runs in the tournament recently. Ohio State hasn't done much. A&M's got to be the better team, right? Yeah, probably, but maybe not by much here. And they're also going to look and see Ohio State just barely got by an Oakland team. We don't know how good Oakland really is, although they tend to be one of the kind of like better teams in the horizon or whatever. Whereas Texas A&M absolutely annihilated an opponent in their first game, but that was Texas A&M Commerce, even though that's an in-state little brother situation there. A&M Commerce, I think, was new to Division I last year, so they're newbies, they're newcomers. They're not a very good team, certainly nowhere near as strong a team as Oakland is. And Texas A&M might have had that little extra motivation because of the Bobby Knight death, that situation, even though these guys, I don't think, knew him personally because he hadn't been coaching there for wait, that was Texas A&M. I'm thinking of Texas Tech, so never mind. Scratch all of that. But yeah, Texas A&M, yeah, the A&M Commerce were still in like the little brother spot, but they're still just not a good team. So A&M was able to beat them quite easily. But Ohio State, so people are going to look at that and think A&M's certainly the much better team because they wanted a blowout against a cupcake. Ohio State didn't do well against a perceived cupcake, but Oakland certainly better than Texas A&M Commerce. So I don't take too much away from that. And if anything, Ohio State might have been looking ahead to this, and it might just shock them back into focus a little bit. This is a much bigger game, so I'd only lean to Ohio State there. That's going to do it. Too much going on tonight, man, and this morning. But those 3 NBA plays, hopefully we do well with those. Peace.